Walk away, slut. This ain't your damn business.
6 on 1? Y'all call that fair?
Mind your own monkey, for we put you on the ground next to him.
The old biker on the pavement turned his head. His voice cracked.
Help me. Please.
That broke something in Brandon's chest. Trent stepped between them, rusted wrench in his fist, taped it against the motor.
Get back to your kennel or cough up the money. I'll spare this old man. He asked for help. I'm helping him.
Trent laughed, sharp through his nose. The 5 behind him spread out wide. 6 bullies, 1 black young man, 1 Hell's Angel bleeding on the ground. The man begging for help was on every news channel by Monday. The hardest part of Brandon's life wasn't the work. It was being looked at like he was about to take something. 5 in the morning, the kitchen light was already on. Grandma Maylene was at the counter checking her blood sugar with the same kit she'd been using for 3 years. The strip read high. She didn't say anything, just wrote it in her notebook. Brandon kissed the top of her head on the way to the stove. The oven door wouldn't close all the way. He'd been meaning to fix it. He pulled a screwdriver from his back pocket, right next to the small adjustable wrench he always carried, and tightened the hinge in under a minute. There, it'll hold till payday. Maylene smiled at him without looking up. You don't have to fix everything around here, baby. Somebody's gotta. He counted what was in his pocket on the way out. $34. He paused by the rent jar on the counter, looked over his shoulder, slid a folded 20 between the bills already inside. He was almost out the door when she said his name. Brandon. He froze. She was leaning in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. She wasn't angry. She was something worse than angry. She was sad. Bring that back. Grandma, bring it back, baby. He walked over, took the 20 out of the jar, held it in his palm. She lowered her voice. She didn't need to be loud. Maylene Sullivan had never needed to be loud. Listen to me one time. Our family, from your great-grandfather down, we don't take what we didn't earn. And we don't take from our own children to pay for ourselves. You hear me? Yes, ma'am. That medical bill is mine, not yours. It's a lot. It's still mine. She put her hand on his cheek. I don't need you to save me, Brandon. I need you to become a man I'm proud of when I'm gone. That's how you pay me back. You understand? He nodded. He put the 20 into his wallet. He kissed her again and walked out. The bike chain had snapped 2 weeks ago. He hadn't had time to fix his own, so he walked 22 blocks to Hartman's Auto. The summer heat was already climbing. A woman at the corner gas station eyed him as he bought a soda. You work here, son? No, ma'am. Just a customer. She didn't apologize. He didn't expect one. 3 blocks later, a patrol car slowed beside him. The officer looked him up and down, didn't roll the window, drove on. Brandon didn't react. His face didn't move. He just kept walking. He'd been doing this since he was 12. Cole Hartman was already at the shop, hood up on a Honda Civic, cussing at the alternator. He looked up when Brandon walked in. You're early. Bus didn't come, so I started early. Bus comes at 6:15. I know, Cole grunted. That was the closest thing to a compliment he gave. Brandon pulled on coveralls and went straight to a 1986 BMW R Series sitting in the back. Old, stubborn, the kind of bike nobody else wanted to touch. He worked on it the way other people pray, quietly, without showing off, all morning. He understood machines. They made sense in a way people didn't. Around 10, a man in a polo shirt walked in with keys to a Lexus. He looked past Brandon, asked Cole if the mechanic was in. Brandon kept his head down in the BMW. He didn't say a word. Cole jerked his thumb at him. He is the mechanic. The man blinked, tried to recover. Brandon just nodded, polite, and went back to work. He'd been doing this since he was 12, too. On his lunch break, he opened his backpack, pulled out a library book with a sticker on the spine. Modern Custom Builders, a Visual History. He'd already checked it out twice this year. He flipped to the dog-eared page. A photo of a cherry red 1959 panhead with custom pinstripe tankwork. The caption underneath read, Henry Iron Hank Calloway, Calloway Custom Cycles, founder. Brandon traced the lines with his finger. He whispered the names the way other guys whispered the names of athletes. Calloway, Monroe, Roeder, Foose. Cole walked past with a coffee. You ever gonna build one of those? One day. Yeah, you will. It was the kindest thing Cole had said in months. Brandon walked home that night with his arms aching and the wrench still in his back pocket. He passed a billboard for the West Coast Custom Bike Show. $350 to enter your build. $350 he didn't have. He stopped at the corner of Pine and 6th. Mrs. Davies was on her stoop, struggling with 2 grocery bags and her cane. He crossed the street without thinking. Let me get those, ma'am. Oh, Brandon, you don't have to. It's nothing. He carried the bags up the steps. He didn't wait for thanks. He waved and kept walking. Behind him, on her stoop, Mrs. Davies watched him go and shook her head, smiling. That boy. Brandon didn't hear her. He was already thinking about tomorrow's shift, about the medical bill on the counter, about a cherry red panhead he'd never seen in real life, and how he might never get to. Brandon almost didn't take the shortcut. He almost stayed on Main Street. Almost. It was 4 o'clock. The summer heat had peaked. His shift had run long. His arms ached. The library book was heavier in his backpack than it had been this morning. He cut behind the Sunoco station on 5th Street. He didn't see the bike yet. 2 blocks away, the man who built the bike was pumping fuel into the tank. His name was Henry Calloway. He was 60 years old. Cherry red 1959 panhead, polished tank, custom pinstripe work he'd done with his own hands when he was 30. He was alone. His phone had died an hour ago. He'd ridden out alone today because he liked riding alone. He always had. He noticed the boys when they got out of the Chevy. He noticed the way they looked at his bike before they looked at him. He'd been around long enough to know what that meant. He didn't move. He kept pumping fuel. Trent Vaughn walked up first, 22 years old, cocky in the way only broke boys with nothing to lose are cocky. He whistled like he was impressed. Look at this antique, boys. Grandpa rode his tricycle to the wrong side of town. Hank didn't answer. Cody spat on the pavement 2 feet from Hank's boot. Old man, you lost? Nursing home's the other way. Hank didn't answer. The third one, Brett, laughed. The other 3 spread out behind. 6 of them now. 6 on 1. What, you deaf old-timer? Or just too old to hear? Hank set the pump back in the cradle. He still didn't turn around. Trent walked a slow circle around the panhead, stopped at the front, pretended to admire it, whistled again. How much you think this thing's worth, boys? 8 grand? 10? That Grandpa won't even remember where he parked it tomorrow. A pickup truck rolled past the gas station. The driver looked, counted the numbers, kept driving. Cody kicked the back tire. Hank's shoulders tensed for half a second, then went still. He still didn't turn around. That stillness should have told them something. It didn't. Trent's smile dropped. He walked over to the corner of the lot where the old air pump used to be. There was a metal toolbox sitting on its side, abandoned, half full of rust water and forgotten parts. He reached in, pulled out a long, rusted pipe wrench. Heavy. The kind that breaks bone if it lands right. He hefted it in his hand, tapped it against his palm. Keys, wallet, watch. Slow, old man, or this is going to leave a mark. Hank turned around. For the first time, the boys saw his face. There was no fear in it, not even surprise. His voice was low and steady, the voice of a man who had been in worse rooms than this. "You don't want to do this, son. Walk away." Trent stared at him for half a second. Then he laughed, sharp through his nose, looked back at his boys. "You hear that, boys? Old man thinks he's giving us advice." A young mother pushed a stroller toward the gas station entrance. She saw the 6 of them. She saw Hank. She turned the stroller around and walked the other way. Inside the station, the clerk watched through the glass. He saw the wrench. He counted the numbers. He slid the deadbolt across the door from the inside. He did not pick up the phone. The first blow didn't come from Trent. Cody stepped forward and slammed an empty beer bottle down on the concrete 6 inches from Hank's foot. Glass exploded across the pavement. A warning shot. Hank didn't move. Behind him, Brett picked up a plastic patio chair, the cheap red kind the station kept for smokers, and swung it hard into Hank's back. The chair cracked. Hank's body folded. He dropped to one knee on the broken glass. His breath left him in a single, rough exhale. He didn't cry out. He didn't beg yet. He just knelt there, head bowed, gathering himself. His shoulder was already stiffening. His lip was split from the inside where his teeth had cut. 60 years old. Alone. No phone, no backup. Nobody watching who was willing to help. He had been in this exact position before, decades ago, in another parking lot, in another life. He'd promised himself then he'd never let it happen again. It was happening again. 2 miles away, Maylene Sullivan tested her blood sugar again. The number was wrong again. She looked at the clock on the wall. Brandon was late. She didn't know why. Trent stood over Hank, wrench in his fist. He bent down so the old man could hear him clearly. "Now you want to give us what we asked for, Grandpa? Or we got to teach you manners first." On the wall behind them, faded under 20 years of sun, was the ghost of a painted mural, a winged motorcycle wheel, a name half-eaten by weather. Way Custom Cycles. Nobody looked at it. 8 seconds. That was all it took. And in those 8 seconds, 2 lives changed forever. But only one of them knew it yet. Brandon turned the corner behind the Sunoco and stopped cold. He saw the old man on his knees. He saw the broken glass around his boots. He saw the cracked plastic chair on its side. He saw the wrench in the lead boy's fist. He saw 6 of them. He took 1 step back. His sneaker scuffed the gravel. That was the sound that gave him away. Jesse turned first, lazy, already smiling. "Yo, walk away, kid. This ain't your block. This ain't your business." Cody turned next. "Bet he's looking for his daddy. Sorry, boy. He ain't here." Brett peeled off from the group and walked toward Brandon with the cracked chair still in his hand. He stopped close. Too close. He stood between Brandon and the old man like a wall. "You deaf too? Same problem as Grandpa? Run home. Tell your mama you saw something. Tell her keep her boy out of grown folks' business." Trent didn't even turn his head. He just spoke over his shoulder, casual. "Let him go. He knows how it works around here. Don't you, boy?" Brandon didn't answer. He looked past Brett, past the broken glass, past the cracked chair. He looked at the old man on his knees. Their eyes met. The old man shook his head once, small, almost invisible. A warning. Go, please, go. And then his voice, cracked, low. "Please, son, just keep walking." That was the moment. 2 seconds. That was how long Brandon stood there. He saw Hank. He saw the wrench. He saw 3 men laughing at him. He looked down at his own hands. His left fist was already closed. His right hand was already on the wrench in his back pocket. "They told me to walk," he thought. "They told that old man to give up. 2 things I was never taught to do." His eyes flicked to the dumpster 6 feet from him. a length of rusted bicycle chain coiled in the dirt where some kid had dumped it last summer. He didn't say anything. He moved. 1. He grabbed the chain with his left hand. He grabbed the water bottle from his backpack strap with his right. He threw the bottle hard at the back of Trent's head. It bounced off. Trent spun, wrench still raised. 2. Brandon was already inside the circle. He drove his shoulder into Cody's chest. Cody dropped backward, the broken bottle neck clattering out of his hand onto the pavement. 3. Brett swung the cracked chair sideways at Brandon's head. Brandon got his left forearm up just in time. The plastic split clean through. Pain shot up to his shoulder. His arm went numb. No blood. Bruise tomorrow. Keep going. 4. Brandon snapped the chain low across Jesse's shins. Jesse screamed and went down sideways, the tree branch in his hand spinning into the gutter. 5. Behind him, Hank moved, the old man who had been on his knees for 2 minutes. Quiet, breathing slow, watching everything. Exploded up from the pavement like a coiled spring. He swept the legs out from under one of the 2 boys still standing behind him. Clean. Practiced. The kid hit the concrete flat on his back, all the air leaving him in one wet sound. For the first time, the boys saw something on the old man's face that wasn't fear. 6. Trent recovered, charged Brandon with the wrench. Brandon twisted sideways, not fast enough. The end of the wrench scraped down his right shoulder, burning, dragging, but the skin held. Brandon dropped under the swing, looped the chain around Trent's wrist, and twisted hard. The wrench fell. 7. Hank was on his feet beside him. He put one heavy hand on Brandon's shoulder, stepped in front of him, set himself between Brandon and the 4 boys still standing. His voice was low, flat, no anger. Boys, walk away while you still can. 8. Something in his face, something none of them could name. They had no way to know what they were looking at, but they felt it in their chest. They felt it in the way the air went cold around him. Trent stared at the old man for 1 full second. Then he turned. He grabbed his wrist. He ran. The other 5 scattered behind him. The Chevy peeled out of the parking lot 2 seconds later. The whole thing was over. Brandon stood there for 1 breath. 2. His knees gave out. He sat down hard on the curb, started shaking, adrenaline crash. His left forearm was already turning purple. His shoulder was on fire. His right knee was scraped through his jeans. No cuts, no blood, just pain that would settle in by tomorrow morning. Hank stood over him for a long moment. He didn't look at Brandon's face. He looked at Brandon's hands. 18 years old, shaking, grease under the fingernails. A small adjustable wrench sticking out of his back pocket. A library card poking out of his wallet on the ground. Hank crouched down. He reached into his vest, pulled out a folded blue bandana, clean, worn soft from years of use. He shook it open, wrapped it carefully around Brandon's swelling forearm and tied it like a brace. His hands moved like a man who had done this 100 times. As he tied the knot, the sun caught the steel ring on his right hand. A compass face set into the band. Brandon's eyes flicked to it, held there for half a second, then dropped. Hank noticed. "What's your name, son?" "Brandon, sir." "Why'd you do that, Brandon?" Brandon was still catching his breath. He had to think about the answer for a moment. Then he just shrugged. "Nobody else was gonna." Hank looked at him for a long time. Hank stood up slowly. His back cracked. He winced once and shook it off. He looked at his panhead, 20 feet away, untouched. The boys had never even gotten to it. He looked back at Brandon, still sitting on the curb, holding his swollen arm. He shook his head, almost smiled. "Kid, you have no idea who you just helped." Behind them, on the gas station wall, The faded mural caught the late afternoon sun. The winged wheel. The half-eaten letters. Way Custom Cycles. Brandon didn't look at it. He was watching the old man's hands. The compass ring. The way the bandana was tied. Something at the back of his mind had started to whisper. He didn't know what it was yet. Hank reached into his vest. Brandon thought he was reaching for a phone. He wasn't. He pulled out a thick roll of cash. Hundreds. Easily 3 or 4 grand. He held it out to Brandon. Take it. For the arm. For your trouble. Brandon looked at the roll, then back at Hank's face. He shook his head once. I'm not going to take money for that, sir. Kid, you took a wrench to the shoulder for a man you don't know. Take it. No, sir. I appreciate it, but no. Hank pushed it forward an inch. His voice softened. For your mom, then. Something flickered behind Brandon's eyes, just for a second. Hank didn't know Brandon's mother had died when he was 9, didn't know about the rent jar, didn't know about the medical bill on the kitchen counter. He didn't know about the woman who that morning had said, "We don't take what we didn't earn." Brandon heard her now, clear as if she was standing right there. He shook his head again. I didn't do it for that. Hank held the cash out one more second. Then he nodded slowly. He folded the roll back into his vest. He didn't push again, he just looked at Brandon. The way a man studies a tool he didn't expect to find in his hand. All right, he said. All right. Brandon pushed himself up off the curb, slowly. His left arm hung stiff at his side. He started to walk past Hank toward the road, toward home. He passed the panhead. He stopped. His eyes went to the tank, the pinstripe work, the hand-laid pattern around the gas cap, the little brass badge on the seat hump. He'd seen this bike in a library book on his bedside table. Cherry red 1959 panhead. Henry Iron Hank Calloway. Calloway Custom Cycles. Founder. Brandon's mouth opened slightly, then closed. He didn't say a word. He just looked at the bike, then at Hank, then at the bike again. Hank watched him put it together. Didn't confirm, didn't deny. Just lifted one corner of his mouth, the closest thing to a smile he'd shown all afternoon. Brandon swallowed, turned, started walking again. Behind him, Hank's voice was quiet. Son, Brandon stopped. We don't forget. Brandon turned back to ask what that meant, but Hank was already pulling his helmet down. The panhead started up with a sound like distant thunder rolling over the hills. He gave Brandon one small nod, kicked the stand, and rolled out of the gas station onto 5th Street. Brandon stood there alone, holding his bandaged arm, watching the cherry-red tank disappear down the road. Then, he started walking home. Inside the Sunoco, the clerk waited until the bike was gone, until Brandon had turned the corner, until the parking lot was empty. Then he picked up the phone, dialed a number he had not dialed in many years. When someone answered, he kept his voice low. It was him. Yeah, the one from the magazine. Some kid pulled him out. Black kid, skinny. Hartman's Auto, I think. He hung up. Brandon got home at 6:40. Maylene was at the kitchen table with her notebook and a glass of water. She looked up. She saw the bandana on his arm, the dirt on his jeans, the way he was favoring his right leg. She set her pen down. Brandon. Caught on a fence on the way home, Grandma. It's fine. She looked at him for a long, slow moment. She did not believe him. He could see her not believing him. But she was tired. The numbers in her notebook were wrong again. And he was home. Sit down. Let me see it. He sat. She unwrapped the bandana, looked at the bruise, cleaned it gently, rewrapped it with gauze from the medicine cabinet. The blue bandana she folded carefully and set on the table beside her notebook. She didn't ask again. He didn't offer. That night, Brandon lay in his bed staring at the water stain on the ceiling. His arm throbbed, his shoulder throbbed. 3 words kept circling through his head over and over. We don't forget. We don't forget. We don't forget. By the next morning, 3 things had already started moving. Brandon didn't know about any of them. The first was a black SUV winding up a private road into the hills outside town. Wyatt Donovan was in the passenger seat. Everyone called him Preacher. He was on the phone. He was not smiling. Yeah, he's fine. 2 cracked ribs, maybe. Won't say. You know him. No, some kid pulled him out. Black kid, 18, skinny, from the east side. Yeah, I know. Hank wants the whole table at the shop tomorrow. Whole table. And bring the photographer. He hung up. The SUV climbed the hill, past the gate, past the dogs. The second thing was happening downtown. Linda Brennan, a reporter at the local news station, frowned at the voicemail on her desk phone. She listened to it twice. Then she walked to the records room, pulled an old manila folder from a low cabinet nobody had opened in years. The tab read, Callaway, Henry, Custom Cycles, 1995 to present. She opened it. The first photo was a man in his 30s standing in front of a small shop, cherry red panhead behind him. She picked up her phone, dialed. Hey, it's Linda. I think I have something. The third thing was inside the chapter clubhouse on the edge of town. Wood walls, leather chairs, a long oak table. The wall behind Hank's seat was covered floor to ceiling in framed photographs of bikes and the men who had built them. Hank sat at the head. 10 other men sat down the table. Nobody touched their coffee. He spoke quietly. He didn't need to be loud either. There's a kid, Hartman's Auto on the east side. I want to know everything about him. Family, school, medical, bills, trouble, friends, everything. One of the older men spoke up. What are we doing with this, Hank? Hank looked at him a long moment. 25 years I've sat at this table. We've spent 25 years remembering. Now I want to know if it's time to start passing it on. Nobody said anything to that. Hank tapped the table once with his ring. The steel compass made a small, clean sound on the oak. Find me everything. Nobody approaches him. Not yet. Across town, Brandon got to work early. He'd slept badly. His arm ached. Cole looked up from a tire iron and raised an eyebrow. What happened to your arm? Walked into a fence. Cole grunted, went back to the tire iron. On the way home that afternoon, Brandon noticed a man across the street pretending to read a newspaper. Not doing a great job of it. Brandon didn't think much of it. He was tired. He had no idea 40 motorcycles were already pointed at his street. Brandon was changing the oil on a Honda Civic when he heard it. He thought it was thunder at first. He stood up, wiped his hands on a rag, listened harder. Then he started counting engines. 5, 10, 15, 20. He stopped counting at 20 because the sound wasn't slowing down. It was getting bigger. Cole came out from under the lift, wrench still in his hand. He looked at Brandon. Brandon looked at Cole. What is that? I don't know. They walked out to the open bay door together. The sound rolled down the street like an oncoming storm. Then it turned the corner onto Maple, and the entire block went still. 43 motorcycles, maybe more, 2 abreast, perfect formation, filling the street curb to curb. Old custom builds, new machines, cherry paint, chrome, black leather, white hair under helmets, Hell's Angels patches on every back. Traffic stopped in both directions. A woman across the street walked out onto her porch holding a dish towel. 2 kids came out from behind the laundromat. Mrs. Davies stepped out onto her stoop with her cane. The motorcycles pulled up along the curb in front of Hartman's Auto and idled in unison. Then, one by one, the engines cut. Silence dropped on the street like a heavy blanket. A single bike rolled forward from the front. Cherry red, 1959 Panhead. Hank Calloway swung his leg over the seat and dismounted. He pulled his helmet off and tucked it under his arm. Behind him, the rest of the chapter stayed standing by their bikes, helmets in their hands, like an honor guard at a funeral. Cole made a sound in his throat, half a word. He couldn't finish it. Brandon. Yeah. Brandon. What? Cole's voice dropped to almost nothing. That's Iron Hank Calloway. Brandon didn't say anything because some part of him had already known. Yesterday, when he saw the bike, when he saw the bandana, when he saw the ring. He just hadn't let himself believe it. A news van pulled up at the end of the block. Linda Brennan stepped out with a camera operator behind her. She didn't run, she walked, like she had been waiting for this moment her entire career. Hank stopped 6 feet in front of Brandon. He looked Brandon up and down. Then he looked over at Cole and gave him a small nod. Cole Hartman? Yes, sir. Heard a lot about you. You've raised a good employee here. Cole tried to answer. Nothing came out. Hank turned back to Brandon. You feeling all right today, son? Yes, sir. Arm? Healing. Hank nodded once. Then he raised his voice, not loud, but enough so the whole street could hear him. Enough so Linda Brennan's microphone could catch every word. I owe this young man an introduction. My name is Henry Calloway. Most people call me Hank. Some people call me Iron Hank. I founded Calloway Custom Cycles in 1995. We have shops in 5 states. I've also served as president of this chapter of the Hells Angels for 25 years. That's the reason the gas station clerk on 5th Street locked the door instead of calling the police 3 days ago. He didn't need the police. He knew who to call. A murmur went through the crowd on the sidewalks. Hank wasn't finished. In this chapter, we have one rule above all the others. We don't forget. We don't forget who stood up. We don't forget who stayed quiet. We don't forget who turned the other way. And we do not forget who ran in. He turned to face Brandon directly. 3 days ago, a kid with a bruised arm and a wrench in his back pocket ran in. He didn't ask who I was. He didn't ask what was in it for him. He didn't even ask my name until after. He looked back at the camera. That's the kind of person I have spent my entire life looking for, and almost never found. Then he stopped talking. The silence stretched. A small Toyota Corolla pulled up at the corner. The door opened. Maylene Sullivan stepped out, leaning on the car for balance. Mrs. Davies had been the one to call her. Maylene didn't know any of these men. She didn't know what was happening. She only knew her grandson was standing in the middle of it. She walked through the parted crowd, slowly, with her chin up. She stopped beside Brandon, took his hand, squeezed it once. Brandon still hadn't moved. His face hadn't changed. He wasn't crying. He wasn't smiling. He just stood there, holding his grandmother's hand, looking at the man he'd grown up reading about in library books. Maylene was the one whose eyes were wet. Hank saw her. He took his helmet from under his arm and held it against his chest, a small gesture, an old one. He gave her a single, deep nod. Ma'am. She nodded back. She didn't say anything yet. Hank turned back to Brandon. I told you, son, we don't forget. I meant it. We've got a few things to talk about, you and me. And your grandmother. But not here, not in front of all this. He looked at the news camera, then back at Brandon. Come to the shop tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Bring her with you. We've got business. Brandon found his voice. Yes, sir. Hank put one hand on Brandon's good shoulder, squeezed once. The compass ring caught the late afternoon sun. Then he turned, swung his leg back over the panhead, and pulled his helmet down. 43 engines started at once. The street shook with it. Nobody on that block forgot the sound for the rest of their lives. The next morning, Brandon and his grandmother stepped out of an Uber in front of the biggest custom motorcycle shop in the state. Hank Calloway was standing at the front door with a folder in his hand. He didn't wait for them to walk up. He came down the steps to meet them. "Mrs. Sullivan." "Mr. Calloway? Thank you for coming, both of you." He held the door open. The brass handle had the same compass design as his ring. Brandon noticed. Maylene noticed Brandon notice. Inside, the building was a converted warehouse. 15,000 square feet of polished concrete floor, exposed brick, and motorcycles. Brandon had only ever seen these bikes in library books. Now they were 6 feet away. He didn't reach out to touch them. He kept his hands at his sides. He kept walking. Hank led them past the showroom and through a heavy wooden door into a back room. A long table, leather chairs, a wall of framed photographs of bikes the chapter had built over 25 years. He pulled out a chair for Maylene, sat down across from her, set the folder on the table between them. He looked at Brandon, then at Maylene. Then he folded his hands. "I'm going to say 2 things this morning, just 2. Then we talk." Maylene nodded once. "The first one is for you, ma'am, not for him. Yesterday, I had my people pull every medical bill in your name from the last 18 months. We are paying every single one of them, in full, today, by end of business." Maylene's hand tightened around her purse. "Mr. Calloway, I'm not done. Going forward, your insulin, your testing supplies, your doctor visits, all of it covered by the chapter's medical fund, for as long as you need it. We have a fund for this. We use it for our own people. As of today, you are one of our own." Maylene didn't answer. She just stared at the table. Hank turned to Brandon. "The second one is for you. We are offering you a paid apprenticeship at this shop, 5 days a week, starting Monday. You'll work alongside my lead builders. You start at the bottom, cleaning bays, prepping parts, running errands. The pay is enough to live on. The hours will be brutal. You will learn this trade from the men who taught me. That's it." Brandon waited. He thought there was more. There wasn't. "That's the whole offer?" he asked. "That's it. No scholarship, no bike, no—" Hank cut him off, but gently. "Listen carefully, son. This is not a reward for what you did 3 days ago. The reward was the bandana I tied on your arm. We're square on that. This is an investment. I invest in people, not in stories. I don't give anything for free. I give opportunity. Whatever comes after this, school, a build, a shop of your own, that's up to you. You earn it the same way I had to earn mine." Brandon let that sit a moment. Then he nodded. "Yes, sir." Maylene set her hands flat on the table. "Mr. Calloway, may I speak now?" "Yes, ma'am." "I appreciate everything you've said this morning. I do. But I have to tell you something about this family. We don't take gifts we can't repay. We've never taken charity. Not from the church, not from the neighbors, not from anybody. If you pay my medical bills and I have no way to give back, my grandson will not sleep at night, and neither will I." She paused. "So if you want to help us, you'll have to give me a way to earn it. Anyway, I can still work. I can still count. I can still answer a phone. Find something." Hank looked at her for a long moment. Then he leaned back in his chair. Something close to a smile crossed his face. Small, real, surprised. "Ma'am, I had a feeling you were going to say something like that." "Did you now?" "I did." He thought for a second, tapped his ring against the table. The compass clicked softly on the wood. "All right, here's my counter. When this young man opens a community garage in your neighborhood, and he will, I want you at the front counter, every morning, full wages. You greet every customer who walks in. You handle the books. You set the tone of the place. That's the deal. Without you sitting there, there's no shop. Maylene didn't even pause. Then we agree. She put out her hand. He shook it. Brandon watched the two of them shake hands across the table. He hadn't said anything for a while. He had one question left. Mr. Calloway. Hank, why are you doing this for me? Hank looked at him across the table. His face didn't change. Because that's the code, son. You did the right thing when nobody was watching. The code says we don't forget. I don't need a bigger reason than that. And neither should you. There was a knock on the door. Cole Hartman stepped in, holding his cap in his hands. He looked uncomfortable in the leather chair he was offered. Hank didn't waste time. Cole, when we open that community shop in the East Side, I want you as a partner. Senior mechanic, equity stake. You bring the teaching, I bring the build. You in? Cole sat down hard, stared at Hank. You're serious? I don't joke about shops. Yes, sir. I'm in. Hank slid a folder of paperwork across the table to Brandon. Apprenticeship contract. Read it. Sign it when you're ready. Brandon picked up the pen. He read every line. Then he signed his name at the bottom in careful, deliberate handwriting. Brandon Sullivan. Maylene stood behind him with one hand on his shoulder, watching every letter. By Friday, the story had a name. By Sunday, it was on 3 national networks. At the end of the month, the East Side started to look different. Linda Brennan's segment was called The 8-Second Rescue. It ran on a loop. The footage of 43 motorcycles parked outside Hartman's auto became one of those clips people sent each other in group chats. Strangers from other cities wrote letters to the shop. Brandon kept every one of them in a shoebox under his bed. Hell's Angels chapters from across the country sent money to a community fund set up in his name. Brandon never touched it. He told Hank to keep it for later. Hank smiled when he said it. Month 3. Brandon had been at the Calloway shop 10 weeks. He showed up before the sun. He stayed after the others left. The lead builders stopped calling him the kid. They started calling him by name. One Thursday afternoon, Hank pulled him aside. Trade school, fall semester. We'll pay the tuition and the books. You keep working here weekends. Yes or no? Yes, sir. Good answer. Month 6. Maylene's blood sugar had been steady for the first time in 5 years. Her doctor wanted to know what she'd changed. She just smiled. That weekend, 6 members of the chapter showed up at the house with a truck full of lumber and a generator. Cole came with them. So did Preacher. They worked Saturdays and Sundays for 8 weeks straight. New roof, new insulation, an accessibility ramp from the sidewalk to the porch, a real kitchen. Maylene refused to leave during the work. She sat on a folding chair on the porch with a glass of sweet tea and supervised every nail. By the end of the summer, she could open every drawer in her own kitchen without bending down. Month 9. Brandon finished his first semester at the top of his class. Hank called him into the back office at the flagship. Time to write a business plan. Community garage, East Side. You design it, you staff it, you pitch it to me by Christmas. If it's good, I fund it. If it's not, we keep working. Brandon spent the next 8 weeks at the kitchen table with Maylene helping him spell check. Month 12. He pitched it. Hank read it twice. Then he signed. The opening day of Sullivan and Calloway Community Garage was a Saturday in February. Snow on the ground, a bright, clear sky. Brandon picked the name himself. Mrs. Davies was the first customer through the door. She came in with a grandson and a broken alternator she couldn't afford to replace. Brandon didn't charge her. He fixed it in 2 hours and gave her grandson a soda from the fridge. Maylene sat behind the front counter in a clean apron, writing in a ledger with a pen that Hank had given her as a gift. She greeted every customer by name. By the end of the first week, she remembered all of them. On the wall behind the counter, in a simple wooden frame, was a folded blue bandana, the one Hank had tied around Brandon's swollen forearm in a gas station parking lot. Underneath the frame, carved into a strip of dark walnut wood, were 3 words: "We don't forget." When Hank came to the opening, he stood in front of the frame for a long minute. He didn't speak. He didn't tell anyone what it meant to him. He touched the glass once with the tip of his finger. He nodded once. Then he turned and went to find Maylene at the counter. Year 1.5. Trent Vaughn walked into the shop on a Tuesday morning, sober, 40 pounds lighter, hands shaking. He sat down across from Brandon in the office. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He asked for a job. Brandon looked at him a long time. Then he stood up, walked to the supply closet, came back with a broom, handed it across the desk. "Start there." Trent took the broom. He didn't say thank you. He just nodded and went to sweep the front of the shop. He was still there a year later. Year 2. Hank and Brandon began building a panhead together, not as a gift, as a teaching project. 8 months of nights and Saturdays at the flagship. By then, 2 more scholarships had gone out under the Callaway Sullivan name. One went to a girl from the East Side who wanted to be a nurse. A trade magazine wrote up the partnership as a model program. Brandon kept the wrench in his back pocket every day. 2 years later, Brandon was walking home from his own shop when he heard it. Shouting. Behind a building 2 blocks south of the garage, he knew the sound. He was 20 now, different clothes, same posture, same wrench in the same back pocket. No scar on his forearm, only the bandana framed on the wall behind his grandmother's counter. He wasn't afraid anymore, but he remembered. He didn't run. He walked. Behind the building, 3 older boys had a smaller kid pinned against the brick. 12 years old, black, skinny, glasses crooked on his face, his backpack on the ground. Library books spilled across the gravel. Brandon stepped into the gap. He didn't say anything. He just stood there and looked at the 3 of them. They looked back at him. Then they looked at his shirt, Sullivan and Callaway Community Garage across the chest. They'd heard the name. Everybody on the East Side had. The biggest one swallowed. They started backing away. Then they turned and walked off fast. Brandon waited until they were gone. Then he crouched down and started picking up the kids' books. One of them was a library book on engines. Same sticker on the spine he used to carry himself. "Yours?" "Yes, sir." Brandon handed it back. The kid stared at him. His hands were shaking. His voice was barely a whisper. "Why'd you help me?" Brandon set the books on the backpack. He knelt down, eye level with the kid. He said it quietly. 3 words. "We don't forget." The kid didn't understand yet, but Brandon could see him filing the words away somewhere safe. He'd understand one day. Brandon reached into his back pocket, pulled out a business card from the shop, handed it over. "You like engines?" The kid nodded. "Come by on Saturday, 8 in the morning. Bring that library book. I'll teach you." The kid took the card with both hands like it was made of glass. "Yes, sir." Brandon, not sir. "Yes, Brandon." The kid hoisted his backpack and started walking the other way. After 10 steps, he looked back. Brandon was still there. Brandon nodded once. The kid nodded back. Then he ran. Brandon walked the long way back to the shop. Late afternoon light across the rooftops. He passed the old Sunoco station on 5th Street. Different owner now, fresh blue paint over the wall. But underneath the new coat, if you knew where to look, you could still see the faint outline of a winged motorcycle wheel and a name half eaten by sun. Brandon didn't look. He didn't need to. Through the front window of the garage, Maylene was at the counter with a customer, writing in her ledger. She glanced up, saw him, lifted her hand. He lifted his hand back. And he kept walking home. I want to tell you something about why this story stayed with me. Brandon walked through a world that watched him with suspicion. The woman at the gas station who asked if he worked there. The cop who slowed down beside him on the sidewalk. The customer who walked past him to ask Cole if the mechanic was in. None of that went away because he saved one man's life. What stayed with me is that he chose kindness anyway, every day, including the day it mattered most. Would you have run in? Tell me honestly in the comments.